it's your girl Nancy Red, and this is season 3 of Mompreneurs, where every week we celebrate beautiful Black entrepreneurs who are simultaneously amazing business moguls and awesome moms, and we listen to their life stories and inspiring advice. And I am so excited because one day I was feeling some kind of way. It was not a good day. And I was scrolling through Instagram. I was doing the whole doom scrolling, and I stumbled upon this beautiful woman who was sharing life gems. And I noticed that like a lot of people I tremendously respect also was liking and sharing and following. And I looked into it and I realized that it was this incredible self-help healing expert and mental health advocate, and her name is Yasmine Cheyenne. And it's been a little over a year since I've been one of her biggest fangirls, and I immediately at the time bought her first book, which is The Sugar Jar, and the subtitle of that one is Creating Boundaries, Embracing Self-Healing, and Enjoying the Sweet Things in Life, which I don't know about you, but we all could use a little refresher on how to do those things. But in particular from someone who's very relatable. And I'm really excited to talk to her today because she also now is out with a new book. Yes, this incredible mompreneur has another book called Wisdom of the Path, the beautiful and bumpy ride to healing and trusting our inner guide. That's still not all. Yasmine is also a recovering perfectionist, and she's everywhere. And she's speaking very candidly and clearly with stories and experiences that resonate with us so much. And she's going to share a little bit about her inspirational journey as a mompreneur, from Brooklyn kid to brilliant businesswoman today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. What an intro.
Well, what a
I love
person.
it.
Yeah, you should love it. You earned it. Do you
Oh,
feel
thank
like,
you.
because again, one of the things I love about you is not only are you a recovering perfectionist, but you talk very candidly about anxiety, which is something
hmm
I've been grappling with more in my middle age. Perimenopause has set off some kind of anxiety spiral, which is not cool.
Yeah.
So when you hear those beautiful things about yourself, as someone who's written these books and works on this, do you still have a hard time accepting your amazingness, or are you in the full space of receiving now?
I am in the full space of receiving. I think it was just the wordplay, like from Brooklyn kid to business. I was like, oh, I like that.
I'm glad you like it because we like
Yeah.
you. We love the fact that you speak in a language on your socials and in your books that we can all understand. Like you actually write about, and you'll often share information about like the importance of sizing people up and being careful about the people that you let into your life for good reasons. And you also help other people understand how to sniff out the people in their life who are actually supportive and positive. So I feel really good that you're here with me today. So thank you for trusting me.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so before we get into your mompreneurship, let's talk about who makes you a mom. Tell us about your household.
Yes, so I have two daughters, a 14-year-old, which is wild,
Oh my
and a
gosh.
6-year-old. Um, it's such an interesting time. First of all, this is the first week back to school, so I've been like all the emotions of like, oh my gosh, they're really growing up. There's something about your kid going from kindergarten to first grade that is just like, oh my gosh, they're really like this is happening. So yeah, they make me a mom, and it's one of I don't know. I feel like it's the thing that cracks me open. Like it's the thing that invites me to a softer version of being with myself because I want them to be that with themselves and I want to be that with them. So yeah.
I agree. It's interesting. I have a 13-year-old
Oh my
and a
God.
10-year-old, and I work really hard. I'm not perfect. I work really hard to treat them with the gentleness that I
hmm
hope prevent some of the traumas that
Yeah.
I am still recovering from. Not from any nefarious experiences,
hmm
but just life, be life in. And so
Yeah.
part of that sometimes turns into the anxiety spiral. Am I doing enough? Am I doing too much? But when especially when they become really sentient beings, like your 14-year-old and my 13-year-old, these are not people you can just tell something like, "Oh yes, the tooth fairy is coming," or these are
Yeah.
people who
That
are
those
in
days are
the
done.
they're done. They are in the real world with you. They are
hmm
actively in these streets.
Yes. Hopefully not
challenging.
in these streets, but yeah.
They're in the proverbial streets
Proverbial street.
emotionally, the
Yeah.
proverbial streets. And so you have this great life, you have this great career, but it didn't just happen. This has been a hard earned journey for you, because did you think, say, let's say 20 years ago, that you would be here with this healthy mindset, with these two children, speaking and having this career and launching a Substack and having followers, hoping to get guidance from you?
Yeah, so I would say I always thought that I would be successful at whatever I did. That was something that I always carried with me. I had no idea how, but I would say 20 years ago, I had no idea my mindset was toxic. I genuinely was blind to I didn't know that there was another way that you could be, that you could think positively about yourself, that you could have positive relationships. I thought you're just born here into this environment. This is the circle you got. You got to make the best of it. Good luck. And I also think that's important to share because I didn't realize how the people you have around you can negatively impact the goal, the dream, or the belief you have in yourself. And so when I say 20 years ago I had that belief, I was 17. So yes, I did have a belief in myself. And also I didn't know that it was actually going to be possible because of my circumstances, or the circumstances that I believed I had because of what the people around me were saying was possible for me or not. And so it's very interesting to be in this space. I often pinch myself. I don't think that I ever thought that I'd be doing it from this kind of perspective. I don't think that I ever thought that I would be someone that people look to daily to bring them joy and all of the things. I've always been a writer. I've always used writing to communicate, but I'm just so grateful that it's being done in this way. So yes and no. Yes, I had the belief. No, I didn't think it was possible for me in this way.
But you made it so.
Yeah.
The 17-year-old you sought opportunity. Even though you didn't know there was a way to get out of your circle, you got out of your circle. And I think that the way you did is a very brilliant way. And I think we don't talk about this enough. And talk to us about what you chose to do to, whether consciously or subconsciously, break free from the circle that you thought was just your permanent circle.
Yeah, so I would say there was two things going on for me personally. The first thing was I grew up socioeconomically disadvantaged, aka poor. So there was
The
that,
fancy words. I like
the
your
fancy
verbiage.
word. Um, so there was that part of me that was like, maybe I can't make it because of those limitations. Maybe I can't make it because that is just how I was born and this is just what life is going to be. And so I say that to say there were circumstances like Girl Scouts, or I remember being a part of a Delta Sigma Theta organization that was working with girls to teach them about college. And so I had exposure to people who looked like me that were doing different things that I would often use to remind myself there's something else, there's something else. When it comes to the circle and why I'm sharing both of these is that you can have those exposures, but then if your circle is like pulling you back and saying, no, you're going to be like this. This is what your life's going to be. You're not going to have an opportunity. College, what? You're not even smart or whatever. Just a little shady, and kids are kids. And um, a lot of those kids grow up to be adults that have the same shade and the same toxicity, and it may not be their fault, but we don't have to continue to keep those kinds of relationships around us. And so I eventually learned, I would say in my early 20s, I started to realize who I have around me is important, and how do I choose someone that's healthy? And I think the most important question, which is what I teach now, is, am I a healthy person to be around? Am I a good person to be around? Because if I have a circle of people that aren't healthy, it can't just be me. That's the good one in this circle. So I started to work on myself in my early 20s around how can I begin to build a relationship with myself that invites or uh, produces an energy that reflects people that are also going to be people I want to be around too. And I think that has been an evolution I've been on throughout my 20s and 30s, because as a recovering perfectionist, I'm always like, we got to do this right. You got to pick the right people. You got to pick and there's going to be some people that get through the cracks, and you know, you're going to learn, and there's going to be some people who are great, but just not for me. And so, it's been an interesting experience, from that 17-year-old self to today.
And when you started doing the work on yourself, one of the aspects of it is you started being able to help people.
Hmm.
When was one of the first times that you realized that you have a gift, that you actually know and intuitively can guide individuals to being their best self?
Yeah. So when I was 19 years old, I joined the Air Force. And while I was in the Air Force, I served as a victim advocate, basically someone who helps people through domestic violence, victims of sexual abuse, crimes that are absolutely horrific. And I remember helping. There was this particular year where it was just a really hard year in terms of the amount of victims we had coming through. And there were these three women that I remember specifically who were going through some of the hardest times that I ever imagined. And I was like relentless in terms of like finding resources, finding mental health. A lot of times victim advocacy is just a place that you come for paperwork. You don't actually get any support. And I mean, this is like almost 20 years ago now. So nobody was talking about mental health in the way that we are today. So just trying to find resources for them and financial, actual monetary resources for them so they could start their lives again. And I realized I can really hold space for people who have been through really hard times. And not only can I do that in a way that is caring and loving, but it it does something to me in a positive way. Like I don't feel drained, I don't feel exhausted, I don't feel wiped out. Yes, I need to care for myself, but I feel invigorated. I want to do this again. I want to help as many people as I can. So that was that spark for me, like in my early 20s, of realizing there's something here about mental health. There's something here about helping people through hard times. I probably should start my own journey. And I started therapy for the first time.
Wow. And it's interesting. Was the position given to you? Did you request this opportunity? How did you end up in this position that changed lives and also changed your trajectory?
So while I was serving in the Air Force, I was in the legal department, and the legal department helps prosecute cases. And so I had been working on. I had just gotten back from a deployment actually, and they had given me a job that was supposed to give me a break. And I ended up taking over victim advocacy, as a choice, thinking, oh, you know, I can learn more about the other side. I had been on the side that helped to prosecute, but I hadn't been on the side of like what's happening with the victim. And
Wow.
it just once I realized that victims would come, just sign a couple of papers and go about their lives, I was like, what is happening? I mean, I just became one, enraged, and two, inspired to create change. And so, working with the Center of Victims, in DC, going to conferences, working with people around the country, trying to figure out because in the military, and this isn't necessarily related to moms, but it is because it's kind of like that. When you're a mom, you're in this small circle and you're looking for other people who have been through things that you are going through, or you sometimes feel like you're the only one that's going through something, and it's hard to find the resources, and it's hard to find assistance, and it's hard to find help. And sometimes the shame keeps you from even asking. And so I feel like it was the same way when I came into victim advocacy or in any form of going through something that is traumatic. Motherhood is beautiful, and it also is a life changing event. And so, how can we create resources that allow people to have support when they're going through something life changing? And that's essentially what um, I was inspired to do at the time that I was in victim advocacy in the Air Force. But essentially, what I still do and what you do, whether it's for motherhood or what I do through healing, is giving people an opportunity to be connected to resources, um, as they go through something that is completely changing all the time for them.
And also an opportunity to accept that it's okay to ask for resources. It's okay to seek
Mm-hmm.
resources. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think what is so great about your journey, before you were a mom, before you were a mompreneur, when you were in the military, you were in a position of helping. But you took the time to say, I need help myself. Because as we
Mm-hmm.
both know in our community, seeking help, getting therapy, it's not always the first thought, right? Uh,
Yeah.
what went behind that, and what is your advice to other people who are listening to this? Because what this show is about it's a show for mothers who are entrepreneurs, but it's also just recognizing your gifts and recognizing that you deserve a good life, and often that comes
Mm-hmm.
with um, financial independence and generational wealth and all of that. But it has to start with where you start with your books, right? Which is self-healing.
Yeah. I was an early, I was just very much inspired by self-help, the old school self-help, Wayne Dyer, all that stuff, like early on in my life in that time period. And The Secret, everybody remembers that book and all of those kinds of things, right? So I was like, oh my God, I'm so inspired by this. But I realized very quickly that I cannot even allow this in because there is something in the way of me allowing this in, like a belief system, something that I feel about myself that is not allowing me to actually be able to manifest. And although I have a lot of things to say about all of that in terms of the social constructs that we have that may get in the way of manifestation and all of that toxic positivity stuff, I still wanted access. I'm like, I want access to the abundance that is available for me. So therapy was the only option. I knew that, and again, having been in victim advocacy was a blessing because that's what I was recommending, right? So if I'm recommending you've been through this life-changing event, you should, consider these resources. I may not have been through that same kind of life-changing event. And as a mom, you might be listening and thinking, I haven't really had anything happen. If you had a child,
Girl,
that's
the
it.
exactly. You know what? That's a great point. I was actually just because I was talking to my girlfriend and she was like, "How are you doing?" I was like, "I'm okay." But we're all dealing with something. She's like, "No, but you're dealing with a lot. Accept it, acknowledge it, breathe into it." And we always like to think, "Oh, well, everyone's got something going on." That does not diminish the fact that you need therapy, that you need to work with your own stuff. I totally agree.
Yes, that comparative suffering that comes up. I mean, I think Dr. Brene Brown talks about it best, but it's like, oh, I'm not going through that. I'm not going through that hard thing. I didn't just lose my house. I didn't just have this happen. So I didn't just go through a divorce. So I couldn't possibly, still be tired tonight after being up all night, breastfeeding my newborn. Like, no, both of those things can exist. And I think it's an opportunity for us to let go of the shame and the burden and the intense scrutiny that we put on ourselves, even when we are suffering. When we are suffering or when we are struggling, we are so hard on ourselves and saying that I should even be struggling and suffering in perfection. I should be able to do this well. I wanted this child. I wanted this relationship, whatever it is. And that's been a lifetime of work for me, releasing myself off the hook of what I call perfectionism. That's why I say I'm in recovery because I think it's going to be a lifelong journey.
Well, it is, and we're unpacking so many things from our childhood that was done in our best service. Like,
Mm-hmm.
pushing through was
Mm-hmm.
considered to be a necessity. You actually write in your book, which everyone you have to get both these books about the straw that broke your back when you finally had to kind of really think about this is the fact that you were grieving and you hadn't seen anyone grieve before. And I felt that in my core. You talk about grief and single motherhood, and you and I are very similar. We both grew up with single moms, and growing up like you, there were a few words missing from our vernacular, like anxiety, overwhelm. This was not part of the zeitgeist. This was
Never
not
heard
part.
that.
What are you talking about? What is some anxiety? What is some overwhelm? If I started crying, my mom would be like, "Go blow your nose, keep it
Let's get it
pushing."
together. Yep.
Let's get it together. That's the phrase. Let's get it together. But you can't. The world we live in right now does not allow for this. It does not afford for this type of just pushing through.
No, I mean, I don't think we have the capacity to button up as a culture anymore. Thank goodness. And I also think that for most of us, we don't want it for our kids. So unfortunately, you have to model. You have to at some point model what it's like to have anxiety or to have overwhelm or to be in a situation of feeling just completely, I don't know what to do, I'm out of control, or surrender, for your children to also realize, oh, in those moments, I can use these tools. In those moments, I can go to my mom, I can go to my friends, I can seek help, or I can spend time alone and be with my thoughts. Like, the reason why we didn't know how to do it is because no one modeled it for us. And unfortunately, we had to be the first people to go through it and be the pioneers of, maybe you are, but I know that I am, pioneer of, healing and mental health in my little family. So now our children won't have to do that. And I think that's the blessing of it, that we're breaking the generational cycle that our parents didn't have an opportunity to do that. It just wasn't available. It gives me empathy. I think, when you're younger, you may have a little bit of anger, like, oh my God, I wish I knew this. And as you
girl.
get older, you realize, I don't know what I'm doing either. They didn't know. This is great. Like,
And they did not have Instagrams that made them feel okay about the way they were feeling. They just had to just push through with no justification or validation that
right.
it was going to be okay and that this was a normal experience, right? And for me, for how I went about my healing process is in the process of writing books.
Mm-hmm.
All of my books, for the most part, deal with an aspect of myself, whether it is my body, my brain, my hair, my hopes, my weight, my self esteem, my children. It's a way to heal. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that because it's a way to communicate with other people that you're not alone in your thoughts. These are the thoughts that I had. This is how I've dealt with it. Hopefully, this creates a discourse. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing too, which is so
Mm-hmm.
powerful. And it's very unique in the way that you do this. At what point in your journey did you realize, okay, I've been in therapy, I have been healed? How did that morph from I feel healed enough to start my journey of putting it out there in a traditionally published book to help others with my unique perspective and strategies?
Yeah, so the Sugar Jar came out in 2022, December 27th, 2022. So I had already been working with clients one-on-one and group sessions, healing, all of those things for over 10 years. So I think around that, before obviously the book started 2 years before, through 2 or 3 years before that actually. But I knew that I was ready to share my work, my growth, my potential failings. I knew that I was ready to communicate how I got to this point and specifically around boundaries. But I also feel strongly that I don't think that I am healed enough to share. It wasn't, I'm healed enough to share this work. It's, I'm human enough. I'm soft enough to share this work. Because I think, again, going back to perfectionism, I always have to check myself. Like, I'm quick to be like, check, check, check. You've met all the stops. Now you can do this. And it's like, no, actually, I need to be able to be in my vulnerability enough, which means that I'm in my body enough, which means that I've forgiven myself enough to show the scabbed over moments. Because anything that I'm healing actively, I do not talk about, I do not write about. I only share what feels like it's scabbed. But I say scabbed because it could be re-injured. I could have to revisit it. And so I think that is how I know if there's ever a moment where I'm ready to like sub tweet or sub message or something like that, and if I'm feeling petty or anything like that about this particular subject, I know that I'm not ready to to write
I
about
love
that.
it.
I know that that's not something I'm worked on
Listen,
enough.
that is the best advice. I laugh because when we do look at this from the business perspective, don't write about what you don't fully know. Like, what you're going to. I love what you're saying. Like, I'm not saying I'm healed, I'm saying I'm human. And the scabbed is a great part. But if you just have the open wound and it's still
If
bleeding,
it's open,
it's
go
not.
take yourself to therapy.
I know, 100%, or work through it. For example,
Do it right.
now that I'm in perimenopause, I'm like, oh, you should start writing about menopause. I don't know a bit about menopause and the man of the moon. I just began this journey. I could not tell you anything other than the stuff I'm Googling. I can tell you about puberty. I can tell you about bonnets. I can tell you about all this other stuff, right? But I cannot talk about that which I do not know. So I think that's really smart. And it's also a really important part that I want everybody to hear. And this is you in a nutshell, where you say, I'm strong enough to get through this, and I'm also soft enough to get through this. Talk to us
Mm-hmm.
about what you mean when you say that, because we hear the soft life bandied about, but what does that mean when it actually comes to treating yourself and being human and healing?
Yeah, my soft life definition is being willing to allow people in, being willing, like when you asked in the beginning, are you able to receive it? Yes. Being willing to receive it, being willing to hear my bio read and be like, yeah, no, I did that. And I deserve these things. Being able to spend time with friends, being able to be off work. I don't have to be working all the time like I used to. I'm, recovering overworker too. So I think really recognizing that's softness. And I think I encourage people to get curious about what softness is to them. I love trends. I think we all get, engulfed by them, but the soft life is defined by you. So if if somebody's soft life is taking a bubble bath and drinking champagne and doing all that stuff, we shouldn't be like, that's not really doing the work. Well, maybe for them, it really is. Maybe that is soft life. Maybe the idea of taking a bath was something they couldn't even conceive. Maybe they grew up without a bathtub in their houses. Like, people really go through things and then afford themselves or create lives for themselves that mimic what they always dreamed of. And that's considered soft to them. So when we ask ourselves, what's soft to me? That's what we should be more interested in than what I think somebody else is doing. And I think that is how we know we're healing. When I turn to myself, when I see somebody else's healing journey and it invites me to get curious about my own, that's what I think the healing work is for us.
It's incredible. And it's something that you've been on a journey for some time. You started being a victim advocate in the military. You started doing one-on-ones and in groups. Your
Mm-hmm.
first book, The Sugar Jar. Now you have a second book. You speak. You have social media. Talk to us about what makes up your mompreneurship right now. How can people find you, and what do they? What are the ways they can grow with you?
Yeah, so the books are the number one way to grow with me. I think I am the most honest because I don't have a 140 character limit, right? I can just kind of talk.
Yes, and you talk so eloquently too, so
Oh,
it's
thank
amazing. It's just
you.
beautiful, and I feel like sometimes well, I laugh because Toni Morrison always says, my books are hard to read because they're hard to write, right? Which is totally
Mm,
fair, and I do sometimes, like, I would have to read some of those passages over and over again. But what's great about your books is I feel like I'm reading water, mostly because
mm.
I feel like I'm drinking water as I'm reading it. It's just smooth, relatable, and I feel hydrated
I
after
love
each
that.
page. But okay, so your books are the first way to grow with you, because they get the full enchilada.
Yeah, yeah. And then Instagram, I'm always sharing not only just tips or writing thoughts or beliefs or ideas, but I also share other things that support my mental health, like what I drink, what I eat, different things. I'm also a health and wellness coach. So that's something that I share online. But then lastly, my Substack, which is the best way to connect with me and to hear about retreats or workshops or events that I have going on. My newsletter is a great place for me to share updates more regularly, obviously, than I could in a book. And it's monthly, so you don't have to worry about me overwhelming your inbox. It's, once a month check-in.
And so when we look at the aggregate of all of this, getting started with the first book, The Sugar Jar, is very difficult. What was a moment
Hmm.
where you knew that this was actually going to happen? Because the process of getting a book sold, anybody can tell you, is not easy. You said you'd been working on it for a couple of years before. Was it always clear that, yes, you were actually going to have this book actually make it to the audience?
Absolutely not. I mean, I started working on the Sugar Jar, the book, proposal in 2017. I had been teaching the Sugar Jar concept since 2016. And then I decided I wanted to make it into a book in 2017. Just the process of getting an agent was unbelievable. I mean, because it's based on, to be honest with you, it's based on numbers. It's based on whether they think you're going to be sellable. It's based on whether they think you're going to be worth their time. There's so many politics in that space. So just getting an agent was intense. And then writing the proposal. Proposal process is long. It can be pretty daunting. My proposal was long. I speak to friends and I'm like, what? Your proposal was only that many pages? My proposal was like this many pages. So that was a long process. And then, there's the process of finding a publishing house who believes in your book enough to allow you the opportunity to publish it in a way that you want to, because then they come with their idea of what they think the Sugar Jar is, and you have an opportunity to talk to them about what they give you an opportunity to write about. And so having to stand in your conviction. But once I got the Sugar Jar uh, book deal, 6 months, because I had already been working on that book within my work, within my soul. It was a six
Wow.
month process till the
That
book
I
was
want you to know,
done.
anybody listening, it usually takes someone at least a year and a half, 2 years to write the book, let alone get it published, because that's a whole other process. You wrote the whole book in six
The
months.
book
It
from
was
start to
that it
finish.
was that
Yeah.
on it was that up here, up in your neck.
Yes. It was that here. But I think it's because of the long proposal process. I think it's because of the teaching it and hearing people's thoughts and all of that stuff. That that allowed it to be that kind of a process. And with Wisdom of the Past, the second book, I started writing that book while writing the Sugar Jar, because I thought that that was initially just going to be a chapter of the Sugar Jar, but I was already over my word count. And I was already like, it's like, this is clearly not a part of this book. Wisdom of the Past does not belong in the Sugar Jar. So I thought, oh my God, is this my second book? So I kind of put it to the side, finished the Sugar Jar, went through that whole process of selling the book and everything, and came back to it. And I said, oh, this is a book. And so I think it's interesting the way that my topics of the moment come to me. I do think that I know that a lot of people, once they start writing books and once they start doing podcasts and things like that, they don't work with people one on one anymore. I really don't work with people one on one anymore, but I have to be in workshop. I have to be in the work. I think if you're not in the work, I'm not sure how you're teaching, how you're continuing to stay relevant, how you're continuing to stay up on what the energy and what people are experiencing, so that you can actually come with that timely information that people are working through. So yeah, unless you're because even therapists or researchers and things like that, they're constantly in the work. So yeah, it's been a very interesting and exciting process to see how these topics for these books come to be.
I love it. And see, because the reason it was so easy to write, you, like you said, you were in the weeds with it. You said the title of
Hmm.
your book, which was also the workshop that you do at the time, just came to you one day, The Sugar Jar. Explain to our audience who may not have yet picked up your books. Make sure you do, everyone. But until then, can you give them a little bit of explanation about what the sugar jar represents?
Absolutely. And I'll actually tell you the story of how this came to me, because it's really relevant to this podcast. I had just given birth to my second daughter. I was on maternity leave. I was breastfeeding. I was working. I had just coming back to work. So y'all know I was exhausted. This particular day had been like 2 days since I had like showered. I was in the thick of it. And my life had a lot of the things that I thought my life should have for me to be happy and fulfilled. But I was not feeling that way. And I voice noted a friend, and I basically just said, I'm exhausted. I don't feel like myself. I feel bad for complaining about not feeling like myself, because my second baby was a rainbow baby. My business is taking off. Like, I should be here. And I'm drained. And I said, I feel like a jar of sugar, where I have this very sweet energy that people are attracted to. But they come inside of my kitchen and they take my sugar and they don't even care. They don't clean up. There's sugar everywhere. And I'm just dispersed and I'm all over the place. And I feel like I can't even collect myself. I don't even know where all the parts of me are. And so the sugar jar became a way that I could teach people about boundaries, because essentially what I was experiencing was what happens when you don't have boundaries. That yes, everybody wants the sweet parts of you. Nobody wants the hard stuff. Nobody wants
Girl.
your problems. Nobody wants your burdens. They want, can you help me move? Can I borrow your car? Do you have some money? Can you help me plan my wedding? Can you know, and yes, that's a part of being in healthy relationships, and people, we have reciprocity and things like that. But then I would challenge everyone listening. There are some relationships that you have that have never been reciprocal, that it's always you giving. Or perhaps in some situations, you just overgive because you feel like that's the only way that you can be accepted or loved or seen. And so what the sugar jar is encouraging us to do is to put a lid on our beautiful jars of sugar, and to allow people the opportunity to have access to us when we have the energy to give it. So when my sugar jar is on crumbs, I don't have any energy for anyone other than myself, my children, my immediate things. When my sugar jar is full, I still may not have energy for what you want me to do. I have an option on whether I take my lid off or not. And this is what we are inviting ourselves to do with the sugar jar concept, to have that stopping point and ask ourselves, do I want to do this? And I don't think that we are really taught to do this. We're taught, that's your friend, you should be there. That's your aunt, you should do it. You should, you should, you should. And this reprogramming is how we really begin to prioritize ourselves. Stop being so angry and resentful at everybody else taking from us, and realizing that we're a part of the problem too. And that is the power position, because if I'm a part of it, then I can change it.
that is such a unique way to put it. That is so relatable. Like just feeling like you're just dispersed all over the place. And that's why and I do, it's so funny. The thing I would say though is you say we're not taught that. We're taught that now. You're teaching that. We're
Hmm.
learning the B word, the boundaries word. And sometimes it's not even as cut and dry. And in particular, I'm a Southern girl. So I was taught always to be nice and always, don't cause too much trouble. And it catches up with you. And you end up
Hmm.
when you are in your most vulnerable, when you have to parent these kids and do right by them, you're just spent. When you look at the lessons that you're learning, and even still parenting is hard, yeah, you're still
Hmm.
exhausted. What's the difference between the way you feel, the exhaustion you feel, uh, with boundaries in place versus without boundaries in place? Because a lot of people are thinking like, well, what does it even matter? I'm going to be exhausted and miserable anyway. Like I don't see a way that I would be ever relieved, because I'm going to still have to take care of my mom. I'm going to still have to be a good family member. I'm going to still have to take care of these kids. You know,
Yeah.
why even try?
Usually, when we're exhausted, we're not able to use any of our coping skills, right? So I might be exhausted and I turn to cleaning my house because instead of dealing with the fact that I'm exhausted because I didn't tell somebody no, I'm going to add on and find a way to numb out and ignore, and I'm going to clean my house. And then I'm going to project my anger about cleaning my house on my family because I can't actually be honest with the person that I need to be honest with, that I need to say no to about how I feel. So I take that and project it onto my family. And so now the people that I actually want to be close to, the people that I actually want to spend more time with, I'm projecting my feelings onto them. I'm pushing people away. And then in turn, I'm hard on myself because I'm like, I don't want to do this, but I can't say this. I'm being mean to my family, but actually they don't help me. Nobody helps me. We begin to spiral. We begin to create this story that is actually not realistic. Yes, things are going to be overwhelming either way. But the opposite of that is okay, maybe I told that person, they said, hey, can you help me with this? And I said, no, I can't. And I come home and I realize I can't help them, not because I don't want to, but because I am exhausted. And when I get home, I don't numb out and clean. I sit my butt on the couch. I put on Bluey. I put on Bluey. And
Yes,
I let my,
Lily.
and I let my daughter run around and play and show me all the Bluey games. And I talk to my teen on the couch about her day. And I order in tonight. And I do things that help me take care of myself. And all of those things I just shared are setting boundaries. Like, I don't have time for anything except what I need to be doing right now, which is just taking care of my family and taking care of myself. And I'm still exhausted, but I'm in the recuperation stage. I am refilling myself. I am caring for myself. I am prioritizing myself in the second scenario. In the first scenario, I am just go, go, go. And so, yes, we will be tired, but there is a place in which you can be tired and caring for yourself versus tired and continuing to run yourself into the ground.
Yes, that is so true. And I thought about you the other day. It's so great. First, I thought about you the other day because I'm as when you're fortunate to do cool things, people reach out to you, and I help as many people as I can. But right now, I just genuinely don't have the bandwidth. And someone reached out to me and they asked for help, and I pinged. I said I really want to. You're gonna have to hit me up in January, because I'm overwhelmed right now, and I don't think my help would actually be helpful. But I should be
Mm-hmm.
breathing again in January. And I used to feel, before I started my journey, that the person would hate me, or
Mm-hmm.
they something like that. But they responded. It was so funny. It was very 2024. She was like, "I'll be honest, as a black girl out here doing too much, this is good role modeling." And
Yes.
and I just laughed back at her. Girl, it's the only way. I had to just take the risk that you're gonna think of me as Flaky McFlake. Like,
Yes.
but I think we're becoming, especially with the new generation, we're becoming more comfortable just being human. For the longest week, like we talked about earlier, you could not be human. You had to just drive through and pile through, but it doesn't work that way now. But as an
No.
entrepreneur, though, Yasmin, as someone who's writing the books and doing the social media and doing the coaching and doing the Substack, even though it's once a month, you still got to do it. How do you how do you avoid burnout? Yes, you're watching the Bluey, but yes, you're ordering in, but at the same time, still, it can still pile up even when you don't expect it, especially when you have to be present online to all these
Hmm.
people you don't know. Mental health work is really hard work. So how do you balance like your peace and your parenting and your professional life?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is I don't have to be present online. I get to be present online when I have the space, but that's something I've been working through with myself lately, and I'm sharing that in that way. Like, there are times where I will post, but I'm not going to be on. I used to be online every day, new posts every day. You're going
It
to
was
get this.
impressive. I was impressed.
I don't have the time for it. So I realized, something has to give. With my newsletter, it was originally every week. No, I can't. Something has to give. I am really, really, really blessed to have a team now that helps me. I Up until last year, the summer of last year, I was doing everything by myself. Something has to give, right? So I think it's just recognizing that um, if I'm going to continue to have this business and I want to continue to be present for my children, I want to continue to have a life where I prioritize myself, then I can't do everything. And I definitely can't do everything every day. And I just try to pick moments and things that are non-negotiables for me is I have to get up early in the morning. Like, I think there's sometimes a thought like, oh, you have your own business. So, it's all good. It's the ghetto out here. Like, having your own business is incredibly hard. It's incredibly taxing on our systems. And so I make sure that I take my morning walk every single day. I make sure that I'm drinking water. I make sure that I'm eating foods that help me feel good. And even when I order out things that are going to nourish my body. This isn't something that you have to do. But I've realized when I don't do those things, I am not even able to recover, even when I take time for myself, even when I set boundaries. So I've had to go a step further. And so I think being, again, curiosity is really that. I've been saying this on my book tour, but like, it's curiosity is the birthplace of freedom. We can free ourselves when we allow ourselves to get curious about what we really need. And then the step further is actually taking those small steps to do it. So if it's just getting that sleep tonight, and you're gonna have to, the newsletter isn't gonna go out, or the post isn't gonna go out, the sleep is going to probably be more important than the post or the newsletter. Unless, I mean, obviously sometimes we have things where we're making money and it's like, oh, I got to push through. I still have hustle moments. This tour was a hustle moment. But the way that I take care of myself before and after now are completely different. And I think that's just something that we have to invite in to our lives. And even if you don't have your own business, I know this is mompreneurs, but I know a lot of moms are probably doing both, which I was doing for a long time, taking care of my kids, working a 9 to 5, and I had my business on the side. Even more so than someone who's just running their own business, you have to take time for yourself and recognize that the business can still grow if you are cared for. Like, it doesn't have to be I'm cared for or the business grows. There can be a world where both of those exist. And I really wish I knew that when I was starting my business. So,
I got really great advice from someone that's very similar. They said, I wish I had known when I was going through my darkest times that I didn't have to let myself just go to pot. I didn't have
mm-hmm,
to, I could have been taking a little bit better care of myself. That was an
mm-hmm,
unnecessary rejection of my needs that only
mm-hmm,
made the recovery that much harder. And I think about that. I think about it's even if it's a difficult time, it's only going to get more difficult if you don't take care of yourself and if you don't put in place support systems. And like you said, you're a recovering perfectionist. One thing that's difficult is asking for help. And even if
mm-hmm.
you're asking for paid help, when you mentioned that you were doing all this by yourself and then you finally got some help, I was just like, congratulations, because
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to
It's so
invite
hard.
people. When you are a perfectionist, it's hard to invite people into your space, into your
Mm-hmm.
mind, into your ideas, into your business, into your financials. What is your advice to people, in particular moms, in particular head of household moms who are running things and running their businesses and running their job, on how to seek and claim help? Because people, it's hard to find good help and it's really hard to receive it.
I think this is where you really have to have those good boundaries because when you hire someone and it's not working out, don't wait it out. Don't see how it's going to go. Let them go. Let it
You didn't
go.
have to fire somebody?
I've throughout my career, my life, I've had to for sure. I hate it. I don't like that feeling. I don't like that's not something I enjoy, but I think it is the most loving thing that we can do is let people know like this is not going to work for where I'm going or for what I have going on. And the quicker that we're able to set those boundaries in place, or even if it's not letting someone go, but it's saying, hey, the way that I want to do this is this way, or you have to be willing to communicate. Um, the people that I have working with me now, I mean, I just couldn't even imagine business without them now. And so I think also being willing to relinquish the control. I believe that they are better at what they do than I am, even though I was doing it for myself before they existed. And so I am also willing to, I'm not micromanaging. I'm not asking a million questions. Now that we have the established trust, I trust that they are handling business and I go do other things that I can do now with that time and that energy. And I think that's important as well. That's going to be a part of allowing people in. And it's a part of receiving. When we have good boundaries, we also invite in the ability to receive help. When we don't have good boundaries, it's also often hard for us to receive. And so recognizing that reciprocity comes. If I set a boundary, I'm also opening the door for someone to give to me because I have the space to receive it now. And I think that is a beautiful part of having help in business and learning that it is this cyclical relationship, this healthy cyclical relationship that we can have with folks that come on our team.
It's so valuable. Not having boundaries doesn't just accept how much you affect how much you take on, but how much help you're willing to receive because you're so
Mm-hmm.
caught up in your vortex of chaos
Absolutely.
that it seems impossible to break through. So let's say someone's been doing some work, they're ready to begin. They themselves have talents that they want to expound upon and grow with. What is your advice to anyone listening or watching who might want to create a group, to create opportunities to help other people with their versions of the sugar jar, with their stories, with their paths?
I think if you've been listening to this whole podcast up until this point, the time that we've been talking together, I think that one of the things that I've talked about is that go inward. I always invite people to look in. When you see somebody else doing something online, or when you see somebody else writing books or doing something that you say, that seems really great. I think I can do this. You can. And the beauty of it is you're going to do it in your voice. You're going to do it with your gifts. You're going to do it with your ideas. And the reason why you need to go inward and not copy what you see somebody else doing and not start doing what you see somebody else doing is because there is something that you're going to do with the work, like whether it's boundaries or healing or wellness, that I could never think of, that the other big people in wellness, the really large people in wellness would never dream of because you're going to be given the gift. And I think also the last thing that I'll impart is don't think that because your platform isn't large or that the people that you're speaking to don't have all of the pizzazz, the TV, the podcast interviews, all of those things, that you're not being impactful. When I'm in victim advocacy, or even today when I'm working with people in wellness, the people that are doing the most amazing work are the people on the ground, the day-to-day people who are interacting with folks in their communities on a day-to-day basis and encouraging change. So if you're looking to get into this wellness space, ask yourself, am I looking to be famous? Am I looking to do all of these different things? Or am I looking to help? Because I stumbled into this. Like I never would have imagined that this would be my life, specifically because I didn't share any of my work online. I wasn't trying to, this is something that just kind of happened out of sharing my writing online. And yes, I worked for it, but in terms of the way that it developed from wanting to help people one-on-one and wanting to create that change that I wish I had. And so get down to the root of why and what you want to do. And there's a book by someone called Simon Sinek. It's called Start With Why. It's one of my favorite books. And it talks about how you can begin to understand why you're doing what you do so you can actually impart that change, because that is the most important part of being in business, in my opinion, why you're doing it versus what you get out of it. And I hope that is encouraging to folks who might be in the throes of struggling to figure out what that is right now.
So important. And uh, I can't let you leave without asking what your kids think because you never imagined all this, but your kids don't know anything except for all of this, which is weird when we think
Mm-hmm.
about our kids. Because I always try to explain to my kids I had a whole other world before I
Yeah.
had you. Like, you know me as this lady, but let me explain these pasts.
Yeah.
They don't care. Um, they're living in the present and now, as they should, as they are children. But what do your kids think about your successes, about your businesses, about your books?
I think they're really excited about it, but I also think that they don't care as much, which is great. I'm glad that it's not something that creates any sense of I need to live up to this or I need to do these kinds of things. Um, I don't think they fully understand what it is I do. They've been to my book events and things like that. Most of my book events, my 6 year old has had to be walked outside because, because she's, bored. Like, I want her to come for my own reasons. I'm like, I want her to see this. And then, she's 6. But my 14-year-old is now really beginning to understand the work. She knows a lot of my friends who are also in this space or in different spaces similar to this. And so she's encouraged and inspired to find her own way. She's a naturally creative young lady. So I'm really excited to see what she decides to do in her own life.
I love it. I love it. And we're excited to see what you do next. So I have to ask you, we always do Mompreneurs Manifestation, where I ask each of our guests what's next for you, what you're hoping comes next, and how we can help to manifest success for you in this endeavor.
Yes. What I hope comes next is an opportunity to storytell in a unique way. So I'm not sure how that looks, but I'm going to put that out there as the thing that's coming next, or that thing I would like to manifest.
Or maybe your life story, which is much more. We don't have time for all of this. I needed to get to her
No.
goodies, but for her amazing story, read her books, okay? But like
Hmm.
I see there's a future for you, like so many authors, in turning your story to the scripted page. So feel free to
Hmm.
ping me offline. I'm living in that little world. If you want to talk about that, I'm happy to help you however I
Oh, I'd
can.
love
And
to.
we all are supporting you, just like you are supporting us in this endeavor to just be whole and content and not a perfectionist.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Tell us where everyone can find you and learn more about the work that you do.
Yes, primarily on Instagram at Yasmine Cheyenne. You can also find me on Substack, also Yasmine Cheyenne. And then my books, Wisdom of the Path and The Sugar Jar, are available everywhere books are sold.
Yay! Okay, you heard her, y'all. Thank you so much for listening and watching Mompreneurs. Just a reminder, each week a brand new episode goes live on Monday on Urban One Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit urban1podcast.com to learn more. That's urban, the number one, podcast.com. Mompreneurs is brought to you by the Urban One Podcast Network and MadameNoire. Created, produced, and hosted by me, Nancy Red. Executive produced by Sarita Wesley, Allison McGovna, and Tanya Hoffler-Moore. Produced and edited by Jiminique Miller.